Good morning, everybody. Sorry, just stretching a little bit. My back's killing me, but sorry, that was random. Welcome back to the channel. This is United versus Everybody. I am your host, Sean, and how's everybody doing? How's everybody doing this way? It's Friday. We got some fun stuff coming up. Danny V in the house. Good to see you, my friend. How are we doing today? And like he says, hit that like button, guys. I do appreciate that. That does help the channel a lot. Does help the community grow, get more people involved. But Danny V always got my back in the chat, man. But how's everyone doing? Just as in general, how's your heart? How's your heart as a United fan? I know emotions are high right now, right, among the fan base, especially after some of the recent events. And I think most recently after the club released that statement earlier this week following their staff meeting led by Omar Barada. Sounds like more jobs are going to be made redundant as Ineos seek to kind of staunch the bleeding of our club. It sucks. I mean, there's no other way to put it, really. It sucks. But as much as it sucks, and as much as Ineos are kind of being made out to be the bad guys, and as poor, to be fair, as poor as some of their decisions have been since they took over, we can't forget who put us in this mess, and that's the Glazers. Yes, it's a Glazers video. I know that we love those. But I need to do this, I feel like, because it does seem that some fans need a reminder of the fact that the Glazers are absolute criminals. They're scum. They are solely responsible for our current financial crisis, including the job cuts. You guys want to point a finger, it's the Glazers. So today we're going to take a look at some numbers. I've done a little bit of homework online, and quite frankly, I've had quite a few discussions with some people who are way smarter than me when it comes to finances, stock exchanges, I know some people who have spent, the last 10, 15 years day trading, who know what the stock market's all about. Some of them even worked and lived in New York for a time being. So I have spoken with some of them with a lot of their input and opinions on a lot of this stuff. So again, none of this is official. None of this is 100% like, yep. But these are things that I've uncovered, things that I've been told and kind of consulted on. And I think I want to just share some of what I've, kind of uncovered. So like the video, as Danny says, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We are going to talk a little bit about some fun, hard stuff. So it might be a little boring, but I think it could be interesting to have a little discussion about that. So on the job cuts, unless you're bad at your job, it's typically no one likes to see people get fired. And, typically it's not fair, like redundancies, layoffs, cutbacks. It's not fair. It's just, but it happens. Sometimes companies have to do this for any number of reasons, right? Under the Glazers, though, our workforce has steadily grown over the years, like crazy amounts. So this is how much the workforce has grown. You see it starting back in 2011. It really took a big jump. And then that 2013, 2014, and coincidentally, what happened at the end of 2013, Sir Alex, David Gill, these guys gone. The Glazers, Ed Woodward, kind of had free reign. And you see that huge spike going from 2013 to 2014. Really, nobody there. They kind of were, the headmaster was away now. Sir Alex, David Gill retired. So now the Glazers and Woodward just kind of did what they want. But at the end of last season, we had over 1,100 staff at this, the highest in the Premier League, by the way. Liverpool were second. Arsenal only had like just over 700. City between like 500, 600 staff. So even at our lowest in the last 12, 13 years, we were ahead of where City were. We were just short of where, like I said, Arsenal were and stuff. So I don't understand how a club or any business has to increase their workforce that much in a decade. But again, just looking at the numbers, that's what happened, And this is getting to be a problem because more and more companies now are starting to realize that overinflating your staff and then overinflating certain perks and kind of, you could call them lavish things, but quite frankly, they are perks. We'll call them perks, benefits, things like that. Overinflating those kind of things is just not sustainable, especially with the way the economy, especially with COVID hitting people so hard and everything. It's just not sustainable. We talked a little bit the other day. Google and Meta are two of the biggest companies in the world, and they've even started making cuts. Google closed several of its employee cafes, and that includes stopping free meals for employees. And not only that, Google informed these employees via a memo. It wasn't even like a meeting or anything. Meta has done the same thing. They've done away with takeout boxes, which they used to offer, so employees can no longer take food home. And Meta, again, like I said the other day, has even moved its free dinner for staff to start 30 minutes after the last free shuttle leaves. So in order to basically deter employees from staying to eat for free, they have to decide, do we take the free shuttle or do we get food? You can't have both. Um, Again, this is me not saying that I like it. I'm just pointing out how a lot of companies are starting to make a lot of these large scale cutbacks. And again, I'm pointing out the reality of the situation that would not and should not really have gotten to this point had the Glazers just taken a shit. Have they just given a little bit of a shit to how they're running the club and not just sat in Tampa and collected dividends every quarter? Again, it's not sustainable, especially when you are losing money in all other areas as a club. But the Glazers, they wanted to put on the appearance of affluence, the appearance of high society, live that champagne lifestyle on a Coors Light budget, which meant lavish spending in a lot of the wrong areas, bringing that and even bringing the workforce to just wildly excessive numbers like that. It was careless. And again, we're not blaming the staff. No one is not their fault. It's like blaming a player for transferring to United or United spending a lot of money on. It's not their fault. But poor decision making on shiny things like subpar players that we paid a lot of money for, and we pay them a lot of money. New managers, knee-jerk reactions, buying new managers and paying to sack managers and hire new managers more often than not mid-season, and expecting miracles to be worked. That's not great. And then failing to sell these players because of the fact that we overpaid. How many players have we lost for free who were on high wages? You just ran down their contracts. Varane, Martial, Pogba, De Gea. Not blaming the players, but it is what it is. Casemiro looks likely to do the same thing unless we can find a buyer. So again, the decisions got us to this point. And then all the while, the debt continued to increase and increase and increase. The interest, unpaid and paid, not even touching the debt. We spent $1 billion on interest. We still have $1 billion in debt. We've not even touched the debt. Fast forward then to the present, and the club is dangerously close to going bust. Like, I don't think people quite realize just how close we were to going bust had it not been for Ineos and Sir Jim's initial investment in things. The transfer spending in particular has been a shit show. Let me jump in the chat and see how everyone's doing. Jay, welcome back. Good to see you again. For a club so much in debt, these clowns should be taken to court and forfeit ownership of the club and forfeit any idea of making money from any potential sale. They're so lucky I'm not an investor. Yeah, I think there's got to be a way we can saddle them with the debt that they've saddled us with. I think that for me is the biggest issue. Teresa, welcome back. Major question arises from the beginning. How is it possible for the Glazers to acquire the shares to take over United? Wasn't there anyone in the finance department in charge? Inside job. Well, if you know the history behind that, the Rock of Gibraltar was a horse. Sir Alex shared siring rights of that horse. I forget the guy's name now, but basically they had a disagreement over siring rights and everything and fees and payments, and the guy who owned the other half decided to allow Malcolm Glazer to basically perform that buyout and just amass all these shares, which basically gave them more power. So there's a whole thing. If you guys want to know more about it, I should have grabbed this earlier. Let me get this. You guys see me talk about this, but world's biggest cash machine. Go check this out, Chris Blackhurst. This has the whole history of the Glazers kind of buying the club. Now remember, read this with a little bit of objectivity because Blackhurst you can tell that he's not a fan of the Glazers. So maybe you'll enjoy that. There's not as much objectivity as there could be. I'm not trying to make excuses for the Glazers, but you guys know that I'm a big fan of being objective. But there's more in there. We've gone over that a couple times as well. Rob, afternoon, all United fans. Good up, man. Good to see you, Rob. Thanks for using your member emoji. But yeah, the fast forward again to the present, and because of all these poor decisions, the club is in a shit show. And like I said, was dangerously close to going bust. If not been for Sir Jim. The transfer spending in particular has been an absolute shit show. So this is from the last 12 years. This is your net transfer spend for some of the bigger clubs. And as you can see, well ahead of the pack here is United with, about almost 300 million more, about 300, 250 or whatever million more in net spend than Chelsea, who have, you guys know, in the last few years have been spending like crazy, and they're still well shy of where we are. City, even though City continue to buy and buy and buy, they're still well short because they've sold players. And the big problem is we haven't sold enough players. You go down the first four and then you're getting Spurs, and Spurs are, less than half almost of where we are over the last 12 years or so. And it's shit. And then this is the stick that a lot of people will use to beat us with. You spent. Yeah, we have spent, but we spent so poorly that it just doesn't. Again, the analogy I use is if you give a 40-year-old and a 4-year-old $1,000 to go grocery shopping or something, they're going to come back with very, very different groceries because it's just about how you spend the money. As Kieran Maguire said last week, don't spend bigger, spend smarter. And that's just not something that we've done as a club. And that's, again, Glazers, Woodward, Murtaugh, Richard Arnold, all these guys have just fucked it up beyond compare here. Another factor for concern is that Omar Barada basically informed the staff that our estimates for a lot of these cutbacks and this whole transformation plan that he rolled out beginning of the week is also based on European qualification over the next 4 years. Now, I think specifically it was Europa League that they were saying. So has he not taken a peek at the table this season? We're not finishing in the top half, let alone qualifying for Europe. We'd have to win the Europa League. We'd have to win the FA Cup to qualify for Europe. And I don't think any of us are confident in that happening anytime soon. If we miss out on Champions League again, furthermore, we're going to lose even more money as Adidas is going to reduce their sponsorship funding. You guys know that was built into the agreement. We can't be out of Champions League for very long. Adidas aren't going to like that. So I think what I've seen after this meeting and after that kind of statement is there's a lot of fans claiming, okay, aiming for Europa League and stuff, that shows no ambition. But again, these are the same fans who also criticize the 3-year plan to challenge for the league as being unrealistic. So if it's unrealistic or if it's not ambitious, you can't have it both ways. But this is fun, right? We're having such a fun time as United fans right now. So how does Sir Jim's ownership kind of factor into this and in the investment and what the terms of that whole ownership? You got to start by looking a little bit at how we're structured. Since United is a publicly traded entity on the New York Stock Exchange, things are tricky. There are limitations. There are things people can't say or do because we're publicly traded. Knowing a little bit about shares. Again, the shares are a big part of the say-so and the day-to-day things, the bigger picture things, a big part of the say-so and how we got bought, leverage buyout by the Glazers in the first place. So Manchester United's corporate structure splits ownership into Class A shares and Class B shares. Now, the real control, the real say-so lies with the Class B shares, which I guess sounds backwards, but it's just Class B shares actually have 10 times the voting rights of Class A shares. If you have Class A shares, you're not really doing much. It sounds backwards, I know. And so Sir Jim spent a lot of money for about a quarter of the club. So again, that 25% initial investment was for a quarter of those Class A and Class B shares. But even after the deal was approved, the majority of the Class B shares, again, along with all that voting power and all that control, still stood at the Glazer family, split between the 6 siblings. So Sir Jim has the single most shares for a single person. The Glazers have the remainder, but they've split it. So furthermore, as part of the deal that Ratcliffe and the Glazers have agreed to, the initial deal, remember, was a 3-year freeze on dividend payments. That was the deal. The Glazers weren't going to take any dividends for 3 years while we kind of figured this shit out, because I'm sure that in order to start getting control of this, we didn't want them taking any more money. Sounds halfway decent, right? Well, not so fast. So a quote from the club at the time said, "Our board of directors has complete discretion regarding the declaration and payment of dividends and the holders of our Class B ordinary shares, 3/4 of whom again remain with the Glazer family, and they will be able to influence our dividend policies." So basically, the Glazers still have power over what defines and then what defines a dividend and basically how they're subsequently distributed. And again, they've collected 132 million of that. It's not cool. Let's see how the Glazers' dividend payments and how we handle that compares to other clubs, just for point of reference. Oh, you guys notice anything about that? So this is the dividend payment by Premier League to their owners, but for the last 12 years in pounds millions, 132 million paid to the Glazers. And maybe I just need glasses, or maybe there's a typo there. I don't see any red bars on any other of these clubs. Do you? Maybe am I just yeah, I don't see anything. It's fucking scum. Like, and this is the problem people are conveniently forgetting amidst all the recent shit. Is look at that right there. I think that to me is probably one of the most telling, like, visual aids you could get in terms of just how much of a parasitic entity this family has been since they've taken over this club. They pass all the debt onto the club, all the negativity onto Ineos. They still take dividends, and they have a say in how those dividends are defined and distributed. And so they have no incentive to leave, right? Why would they leave? They can basically just sit there and not do anything and collect all that money. I mean, it doesn't matter. And Jay is not happy about this. I'm not happy, but I mean, we have to have a discussion about it, right? Because I think it's important right now. And fair play, like I said yesterday, to Carragher and Neville for speaking up about the Glazers too, because people are forgetting a lot of that. But again, with all that in mind, right, what incentive is there for them to leave? Why would they leave? Unlike a restaurant, for instance, if people are unhappy, if fans are unhappy, you can't just go to a different restaurant. You can't be like, well, fuck this restaurant. I don't like that owner. I'm going to this restaurant. You can't get Manchester United, the product, anywhere else. You can't just go down the street and say, well, here's more Manchester United. That's not the way it works. And the Glazers know it. Furthermore, we have the biggest fan base in the world. So even if people don't show up to matches, their seats are still going to be filled. There's going to be all sorts of tourists, day trippers, like myself. I'm a tourist. I show up for a week. I go to a couple matches, and then I'm out. And that's just the way it works. It's the perfect scheme, though. Zero money invested, millions upon millions collected over the years. This is what we call rentier ownership. Nothing invested, no capital, no investment in there, but just regular kind of passive income. And it's becoming pretty popular. But it is so frustrating. Again, that visual of just 132 million paid to the dividends of the Glazers and no other club is doing the same is so incredibly frustrating. Teresa says, Ineos involvement ensured United wasn't a totally controlled American listed company. Very courageous indeed. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. But this brings us to a question that many have asked over the years. Is there a way to force the Glazers out? Is there a way to do this? How do you force somebody to sell something that they don't want to sell? How do you force somebody into that situation? It is a near impossible task, and it still might be impossible when you get down to the nitty gritty. But again, after looking around a little bit, after speaking to some people who are a little bit smarter than me when it comes to the ins and outs of trading and corporate ownership and how it works with boards and shares and whatnot, I've come up with two little potential options that probably warrant more kind of research to see the plausibility. But these are the options that I've come up with. So one is called motion of no confidence. You get this sometimes with companies when they just kind of lose faith, or that maybe they just want to take things in a different direction, and people in charge, are not seeing eye to eye. This would require the owners of the Class A shares to put their voting power together and table a motion of no confidence in the board of directors at Manchester United. Now, the problem here is that the 6 Glazer family members hold those majority of the shares still. Like I said, they got all of them, right? These are Class B. They have the more voting rights. Again, 10 voting rights per Class B share to per one. So Jim's got 28%. That's 28% of those Class B shares, though. So if he pools his shares together with other investors, this would give them the majority. Problem is, there is a clause in the agreement of these shares that states that the sale of Class B shares reverts them to Class A shares. So one share, one vote. And so in this case, even though Sir Jim, if he pooled his votes, they would have the majority of those other investors. They would have the majority of those shares. The Glazers would still have the voting power. So they would just outvote any challenge. It's really, really intricate when you start looking in. Again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. It's just I'm taking notes as I was listening and talking. If Sir Jim demands that his 28% be Class B shares, then any investor who purchased Class B shares that reverted to Class A shares could demand that either their shares be restored to Class B or that the clause that is null and void, and therefore they're all now Class A. So basically, they're saying like that the clause itself would be null and void if they weren't allowed to do that. Basically, he would set a precedent that other Class B shares or holders can pursue. If he were able to convert his to these Class B to Class A or Class A to Class B, then other investors would be able to argue the same, and they would have precedent to support their case, basically, which after a bit of back and forth would potentially give them the majority voting rights, if that makes sense. And we are getting to that, Rob. What is the 18th month clause from the date Ineos bought in? Yeah, we're getting there next. So stay tuned. Jay says, I know, sue them. Wahaha. Yeah. So basically, first option, Sir Jim demands this, and if it gets it, there's precedent that the other outside investors could then pursue as well. Option 2, existing shareholders could lodge a complaint with the New York Stock Exchange regarding, this comes back to the initial sale of the club a year ago, regarding the rejection of the Sheikh Jassim proposal, as they could argue that the accepted deal with Ineos is not in the best interest of the club. Now, this one kind of excludes Ineos. It does not add value to the club, and it does not benefit the shareholders or the stakeholders, again, as shown by what we discussed already. And basically, the argument here is that the Glazers have acted in their own self-interest in that regard. So this kind of excludes Sir Jim, like I said. What this is, and again, because we're publicly traded, this is a violation of the rules and the regulations of code of conduct in the New York City Stock Exchange. And this complaint can be lodged by anybody. You don't have to be a shareholder. You can just literally log on to the New York Stock Exchange website and file a complaint about the code of conduct. Business trading, basically. It's basically saying like what I've just said. That's another option. It would take a little bit more to get involved, but again, as long as people are collecting money, it's going to be in everyone's interest. So that one is another outside chance of how they could get forced out. So it's not protest outside the megastore or mass walkouts during games, but using the rules of the publicly traded stock exchange arena that the Glazers put us in against them in that regard. It's like entering, it's like you start buying or selling on eBay. In order to do that, you then accept the rules and the code of conduct involved with eBay. And that's just part of it. Or YouTube, putting things on YouTube. I have to follow the same rules. You put the club in a publicly traded arena, you have to follow those rules. And one of those rules, again, could argue, if people file enough complaints, that what you've done is in your own interest and not in the best interest of others involved in the stock of Manchester United. Again, it's a lot. It's boring. And it's probably, it's still way over my head. Again, I'm still struggling to get quite a grasp on a lot of this. I had to have it explained to me a few times. But these are the only semi-plausible scenarios that could maybe sometime lead to the Glazers being forced to leave, put in a situation where they're kind of forced out. And so maybe every United supporter could go lodge a complaint with the New York Stock Exchange. Maybe that's a way to do it. It takes a couple minutes. You can go online and do it. I did one already. So the Glazers, though, in all this have an option of their own, getting back to what Rob says. Now, I was reading an article in the Times, and the Times has good insight regarding the details of Sir Jim's purchase of his quarter of the club. There are clauses that detail the rules surrounding a future sale, since Sir Jim and Ineos purchased the minority stake in a $1.3 billion deal. Ratcliffe, so Sir Jim has the right to refusal if the Glazers decide to sell their stake. But the majority owners, the Glazers, could go another way if another party is willing to pay more. The Glazers now are not, under the terms of the initial deal, they're not allowed to sell or solicit any offers from other potential buyers for the first year. And that was that. Now remember, the deal was officially ratified last February, so it means we've hit that year period now. Now they are allowed, technically, the Glazers to listen to other offers from other potential buyers. Furthermore, as Rob pointed out, after 18 months pass after that initial deal, so 6 months roughly from now, the Glazers can also decide to sell the rest of the club, the entirety of the club, to another interested party. And that would also force Sir Jim to sell his stake to the new party, the new potential owner, for the same price he purchased it. So he wouldn't have lost money. He would just have lost what he invested in the club. So this means he'd get his initial 1.3 billion back. He would not get back his 300 million that he invested. We're about 6 months away. So in 6 months, we could be set for another circus. We're already at a period where the Glazers can start talking. It's kind of like the free transfer, the Boss mural. When you've got 6 months left on your contract, you're going to be a free agent if you're over the age of like 21, 22. I can't remember what it is. You're allowed to start talking to other clubs. This is kind of where we're at right now with the Glazers. They're allowed to start talking to other potential buyers now if they want to. And in 6 months, if Sir Jim doesn't get his shit together, he could be forced to sell. But this means that we could also be set for another circus in 6 months. And there's never a guarantee that a new owner is ever going to be better than the one you have. I think a lot of people think the grass is always greener. It's not always the case. Teresa says Ineos need expert trading advisors on the best way moving forward. I mean, I think Ineos are really trying to figure out a way to do this without having to be saddled with all of the interest, all of the debt and stuff that the club. I think they're really trying to figure that out. We've got the chief business officer in. We've made these cuts, and I don't agree with all of it, but I think that they have to. Otherwise, so in May, I don't know if it's in May, Jay. Anyone getting their hopes up, though, that this means that the Qatari owners could return, they could be set for a little bit of disappointment. Because if you remember that not only did the Sheikh not match the Glazers' asking price, he also was found to not submit the required financial guarantees. He wasn't able to prove the finances on there as well, which is why he wasn't also in the thing. It would be like, this summer or something. So we could be set for an interesting summer. We could be set for a slow summer if things don't go well. Maybe a frustrating summer. And again, in all this, Sir Jim has agreed to the terms of full ownership within the specific amount of time. He's upped his stake recently to nearly 29%. He's invested hundreds of millions of his own money already. He's brought in an entire team to help him figure out, and they continue to add to that team to help him figure it out. With Mark Armstrong, like I said, I don't think you do all that if you're not in it for the long haul, if you're not trying to figure out a way to make it happen. But unfortunately, hopes and dreams only get you so far. It's important to remember, too, again, without his initial investment, the club would literally have no money. So I can understand the whys behind a lot of the seemingly callous, heartless decisions to cut back on cost. But again, with the 6-month deadline looming, if Ineos don't start coming up with alternative solutions, they won't be here long enough to get the chance to help the club heal from these early wounds. 6 months. Sir Jim's got 6 months to figure it out, or the Glazers can sell to someone else. They're already allowed to start talking to someone else if they are not interested. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months. Don't be surprised to see more bad news, more frustration, more job cuts, more cutbacks. Don't be surprised to see a lot of that negativity and things, because I think that right now is the only way that they're going to be able to do anything. But it's interesting when you kind of start diving into the nitty gritty again. There are some plausible options to maybe force the Glazers out. Sir Jim's kind of under pressure right now to figure it out within the next several months. But hopefully we don't have to see more people get fired on top of these latest cuts. Hopefully they can figure out a way. Hopefully this Mark Armstrong guy comes in and helps out. But the next 6 months are going to be interesting, to say the least. But that pretty much does it for me. I mean, like I said, it wasn't going to be... It's pretty boring. It was like reading a textbook. It was like getting a lecture. And again, I'm not an expert. I spent several hours this past week doing a lot of this stuff, looking around online, looking and talking to people that I know, like I said, who know a little bit more about this stuff than I do. They're not football fans, but they know a lot more about the way things are traded on the stock exchange here in the States and stuff in terms of structure and shares and this and that. And so I was trying to be a bit of a sponge this week and soak up as much as I could. Now, with a very low baseline of financial knowledge. It was very rudimentary for me. I had to have it watered down, but from what I can tell, that's pretty much the way things are right now, the way things are going to be going the next few months. And at the end of the day, in 6 months from now, we could have Sir Jim and Ineos might not even be here anymore. So it's going to be interesting. 18 months was pretty ambitious considering where the club was financially. So we'll see what happens there. But that is going to do it from me as far as all that goes. Be sure to come back this afternoon, though, because my schedule cleared up a little bit today. And so I will actually be doing a watch along for the FA Youth Cup against Arsenal. It is streaming for free on the FA's official YouTube channel. So, but we will be back here shortly before kickoff to go over a little bit of news, and then we'll do a watch along for that. So come back, follow along with the action, get involved in the chat. Like the video, please subscribe to the channel. I wish I could give you a lot more information. Obviously, a lot of it is over my head, but a lot of it is it's just not public enough, if that makes sense. Rob says, great video. Thanks, Sean. It is a very complicated subject. Like I said, I wish that I had more, but I feel like that was enough to kind of show a little bit about where things are at, how they got here, and the terms, the ins and outs of Ineos' ownership, what the next 6 months are going to look like for them. Hopefully it helped a little bit. Again, I'm not here to try to educate anybody or anything. It's just we need to make sure we remember why we're here, where we are. And then again, we could be in for another media circus in 6 months, depending on what happens with the finances. So see what happens. Come back this afternoon. We will be doing a watch along the FA Youth Cup. So that kicks off at 2. We'll be here shortly before that. We'll go over the news and everything. So hopefully I'll see you in a few hours. Rob says there's a West Brom game at 7 p.m. They're all 7 p.m. Let me see here. Unfortunately, the FA Youth Cup is not listed on FootMob. Let me see what this says here. And I will see. Hold on one second. No, that was yesterday. Sorry. That was yesterday, Rob. Are you talking about West Brom versus City? Yeah, City won that one 6-0. So yeah, today, United's under-18s play Arsenal under-18s. It's going to kick off at 2 p.m. my time. So we will be here for that. Come back for that later. Keep a lookout. I'll put the link up. Until then, you guys, thank you for stopping by. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And I will hopefully see you guys back later on this afternoon. Take it easy, and I will talk to you later.